two men at the entrance and said, "Does this opening lead to the mines of Kingos?" "It does," replied one of the guards, "but no one is allowed to pass out who once goes in." "Nevertheless," said the boy, "we intend to go in, and we shall come out whenever it pleases us to do so. I am the Prince of Pingaree, and I have come to liberate my people, whom King Gos has enslaved." Now, when the two guards heard this speech, they looked at one another and laughed, and one of them said, "The king was right, for he said the boy was likely to come here and that he would try to set his people free. Also, the king commanded that we must keep the little prince in the mines and set him to work together with his companions." "Then let us obey the king," replied the other man. Inga was surprised at hearing this and asked, "When did King Gos give you this order?" "His Majesty was here in person last night," replied the man, "and went away but an hour ago. He suspected you were coming here and told us to capture you if we could." This report made the boy very anxious, not for himself but for his father, for he feared the king was up to some mischief. So he hastened to enter the mines, and the guards did nothing to oppose him or his companions, their orders being to allow him to go in but not to come out. The little group of adventurers passed through a long, rocky corridor and reached a low, wide cavern, where they found a dozen guards and 100 slaves, the latter being hard at work with picks and shovels, digging for gold, while the guards stood over them with long whips. Inga found many of the men from Pingaree among these slaves, but King Kitticut was not in this cavern, so they passed through it and entered another corridor that led to a second cavern. Here also hundreds of men were working, but the boy did not find his father amongst them, and so went on to a third cavern. The corridors all slanted downward, so that the farther they went the lower into the earth they descended, and now they found the air hot and close and difficult to breathe. Flaming torches were stuck into the walls to give light to the workers, and these added to the oppressive heat. The third and lowest cavern was the last in the mines, and here were many scores of slaves and many guards to keep them at work. So far, none of the guards had paid any attention to Inga's party, but allowed them to proceed as they would. And while the slaves cast curious glances at the boy and girl and man and goat, they dared say nothing. But now the boy walked up to some of the men of Pingaree and asked news of his father, telling them not to fear the guards as he would protect them from the whips. Then he learned that King Kitticut had indeed been working in this very cavern until the evening before, when King Gos had come and taken him away, still loaded with chains. "Seems to me," said King Rinkitink, when he heard this report, "that Gos has carried your father away to Regos to prevent us from rescuing him. He may hide poor Kitticut in a dungeon where we cannot find him." "Perhaps you are right," answered the boy, "but I am determined to find him wherever he may be." Inga spoke firmly and with courage, but he was greatly disappointed to find that King Gos had been before him at the mines and had taken his father away. However, he tried not to feel disheartened, believing he would succeed in the end, in spite of all opposition. Turning to the guards, he said, "Remove the chains from these slaves and set them free." The guards laughed at this order, and one of them brought forward a handful of chains, saying, "His Majesty has commanded us to make you also a slave, for you are never to leave these caverns again." Then he attempted to place the chains on Inga, but the boy indignantly seized them and broke them apart as easily as if they had been cotton cords. When a dozen or more of the guards made a dash to capture him, the prince swung the end of the chain like a whip and drove them into a corner, where they cowered and begged for mercy. Stories of the marvelous strength of the boy prince had already spread to the mines of Regos, and although King Gos had told them that Inga had been deprived of all his magic power, the guards now saw this was not true, so they deemed it wise not to attempt to oppose him. The chains of the slaves had all been riveted fast to their ankles and wrists, but Inga broke the bonds of steel with his hands and set the poor men free. Not only those from Pingaree, but all who had been captured in the many wars and raids of King Gos. They were very grateful, as you may suppose, and agreed to support Prince Inga in whatever action he commanded. He led them to the middle cavern, where all the guards and overseers fled in terror at his approach. And soon he had broken apart the chains of the slaves who had been working in that part of the mines. Then they approached the first cavern and liberated all there. The slaves had been treated so cruelly by the servants of King Gos that they were eager to pursue and slay them in revenge. But Inga held them back and formed them into companies, each company having its own leader. Then he called the leaders together and instructed them to march in good order along the path to the city of Regos, where he would meet them and tell them what to do next. They readily agreed to obey him, and, arming themselves with iron bars and pickaxes which they brought from the mines, the slaves began their march to the city. Zella at first wished to be left behind, that she might make her way to her own home, but neither Rinkitink nor Inga thought it was safe for her to wander alone through the forest, so they induced her to return with them to the city. The boy beached his boat this time at the same place as when he first landed at Regos, and while many of the warriors stood on the shore and before the walls of the city, not one of them attempted to interfere with the boy in any way. Indeed, they seemed uneasy and anxious, and when Inga met Captain Buzzub, the boy asked if anything had happened in his absence. "A great deal has happened," replied Buzzub. "Our king and queen have run away and left us, and we don't know what to do." "Run away!" exclaimed Inga. "Where did they go to?" "Who knows?" said the man, shaking his head despondently. "They departed together a few hours ago in a boat with 40 rowers, and they took with them the king and queen of Pingaree." End of chapter 14.